honoring Joyce today. We really appreciate that. For those who haven't had the opportunity to talk with the family, we hope that you can afterwards. We're going to have a reception at 1573 Trellis Lane, otherwise known as Dean's Old Residence. And please continue to share your thoughts with us there, memories. We love hearing them, they're great. After the talk, we're going to have a brief slideshow that we invite you to stay for, and then right after that, we'll be heading over to the home for the reception. How important is a name? Her name is Joyce. Now, I don't mean her actual name. That's not what I mean. And I don't really mean what its meaning, the literal meaning of Joyce, but what it stands for and what it came to stand for is how important a name is. On the day of her birth, May 7th, 1926, she was given that name, Joyce. It was fresh, it was new, it was full of opportunity. But there's a day that has more meaning, and it's richer for that name. January 15th of this year. The Bible book of Ecclesiastes tells us that a good name is better than good oil. And the day of death is better than the day of birth. By the time Joyce fell asleep in death, she had spent nearly 90 years developing a lot of qualities that we came to know her for. Qualities is strength, generosity, helpfulness, sensibility, devotion, loyalty, hard work, toughness. Boy, that one is the one that keeps coming back, isn't it? Toughness. I can remember as a young child taking a beating from my oldest brother and going to my grandmother crying. And she looked at me and she said, "Would you stop crying? You sound like a little girl." That might have skewed me a little. This woman, she and her siblings, Cassie, Cleve, Floyd, they were all born before the Great Depression and grew up right in the middle of it. That's a tough time. She developed toughness. But it didn't matter what era she grew up in because her mother was legendary in regards to toughness. And her and her siblings were going to be tough. There's no doubt. And her children. And her grandchildren. And you get the point. She was tough, but she was hardworking, as we said. As a parent, she worked tirelessly for a long time to provide for her aging mother, for all of her children, Steve, Tony, Scott, Debbie, Dean. Order got transposed a little. There's so many stories, and hopefully we can get to a lot of them today. But for now, we'll share one on her hardworking. As a young mother, she worked. One of her jobs was at the Palace of Fruit over here in Pengrove, and she would take the leftover fruit home, not as a reward, but because it was a necessity for her family. And so she would negotiate with her employer to get that. And that's part of what she did. She worked at her job, and she worked hard at it, and she worked hard after her job to take care of her family, to keep her family fed. But she was sensible. ways to define sensible. Dean was about 4 years old, her youngest, and he was shopping. At a pharmacy, and he decided he was due for a treat. It was time, and he saw a nice juicy piece of bazooka bubble gum, and it fit just right into his pocket. And as he left the pharmacy, made it down Elm Drive, he pulled that piece of gum out and he enjoyed it. He could chew bubble gum and walk.
One of my first classes.
4 years old?
Preschool.
Preschool. And so he got home, and shortly after he got home, the clerk at the pharmacy had followed him home. Joyce answered the door. He was going to let Dean's mother know what her son had done. And Joyce, being the sensible woman she was, she said, "You mean to tell me that you walked all the way over here for a 1-cent piece of gum?" Yeah, that was her. He did a lot of work for that 1 cent.
Guy didn't know how to act. He did. He did not know how to act when she said that to him. He was stunned.
Who would? She was sensible in other ways. I was the youngest of my brothers, and before I was in school, they were in school. My dad worked. She would take me with her everywhere. I learned the inner workings of salons, gossip. But she was a schmoozer, man. She worked it out so that she had a lot of friends where she needed things. And sensible, hardworking, for sure. You know, when I was a kid, Ron Cromwell Chevron was the last gas station in Novato that offered full service at a gasoline station. But when Granny, that's what I called her, when she drove in, at the time there was full serve lane and there was self-serve lane, and there was a difference in price, right? She pulled into the self-serve lane and honked her horn. And here's the thing, if it was a new attendant, and Lord help him. Because they would try to explain to her that she was in the wrong. And she was explaining to them that they were in the wrong. And they came to agree with her afterwards. Helpfulness. We talked about how that was one of her traits, and a great quality of hers. It didn't always feel helpful at the time, but it usually was. It really was. I think we can agree. On one such occasion, she showed how helpful she could be when her son, Scott, wanted to learn how to drive at 6 or 7 years old. Debbie wanted to know, why? Wait, Scott can drive? How come Scott gets to drive? How come I don't get to drive? I'm older than Scott. Allegedly. Well, you know what Joyce's response was? You didn't ask. You didn't ask, right?
He did.
So, Scott, he couldn't see over the steering wheel of this behemoth, right? Was it 1963 Pontiac? He couldn't see over the steering wheel. He's in the driver's seat. His mom's in the passenger seat. Debbie and Dean are in the back seat. Debbie can see clearly that Scott's driving over the lawn because he missed the road. But Scott wasn't sure because he couldn't see. So he asked his mom, "Mom, is it true? Am I driving on the lawn?" She was helpful. She said to him, "Well, yeah, you're on the grass a little, just go to the left, you'll be all right. So she told her young chauffeur to pull over, and he was doing just fine. 6 or 7-year-old chauffeur. That wasn't the last time a car of hers would drive over a lawn. Devotion. That was another one we talked about. She was devoted as a mother, as a daughter, too. As her children grew to adulthood, she turned her devotion to grandchildren, to friends, and spiritually to God, to find a creator. She spent really more than 40 years searching for and learning about our creator. But that search served her to be actually more devoted to her family and to her loved ones. Up until her 70s, she would drive to Fernley, Nevada. And that's a 4-hour drive for most people, but it would be like 6 or 7 for her. She would drive to Susanville. She would drive to McLeod to see her loved ones. And when she got wind that somebody who lived nearby was going in those areas, she'd try to hitch a ride. Every opportunity she could. She was generous. She did what she could to spoil her 8 grandchildren. But she was generous in more than just any kind of financial way. She spent time, a lot of time, and she bragged about them. She loved her grandkids. And she pitted us against each other. She bragged about the other one when she was with us, and I hope she bragged about us when she was with them. I don't know. I don't know for sure. But she bragged about Daniel, and she bragged about Jim. She bragged about Jillian. Later on, Kyle, Scotty. She bragged about him. And as I got older, I realized, she was hard on us. And as grandkids, I know she was hard on you guys. But she wasn't going to let somebody else be hard on us. She would spin it. And the stories were better. They were better, much better about us when we weren't around. I spent almost every day of the first 5 years of my life with her. She was there for us in our family. We needed her, and she was there for us. She moved with us to help us out. Always a phone call away and then a drive. I only lived a couple miles away from her growing up. I saw her all the time. In a lot of ways, she was actually a second mother to us in our family, me and my brothers. She did cooking and cleaning, and to the extent she could, she picked us up or took us to school when we needed to. She took us to football, baseball games. She helped pay for some of my equipment. I can remember in football. And then when I was 19, I moved in with her when I moved out of my house. I have enough experience to say how hardworking of a woman this lady was. And this is as a 65, 70, 75-year-old. Energy, abundance. One such occasion that I can say about her hardworking was, I think Mike and I were trying to figure this out. We were about a 9 and 11, and that was the age range. And we spent a day working at her house, and we repaired fences, and we mowed the lawn, we weeded, and we gardened.
Clean the gutters,
Cleaned the gutters.
prune the hedges.
Right here.
Build the roof.
And it was a long day, and as a reward, Granny took us to Taco Bell. And Mike and I, scouring over that menu, and Granny turns to us and says, "How much money do you have?" I left my purse at home. It wasn't the last time she would do that. I guess we just assumed she